Family is the bedrock and foundation of any society. But what happens when that foundation is shaken to its core and attacked relentlessly? Today, I join Adam B Coleman, author of From Black Victim to Black Victor, to discuss these issues. In this conversation, we review his incredible interview with Triggernometry on Black People Don't Need Saving, the importance of family and fathers in the home, how child molesters target single mother families, the growing antenatal movement, and many more. If you like the conversations we have on this channel, kindly support by subscribing, liking and sharing our videos, and becoming a patron. So without further ado, let's begin. So how's it going? How's your trip to the UK?
It was good. It was a whirlwind, to be honest with you. But I got to meet a lot of people. Some people you might know from Twitter, some people who are just regular people that I became friends with. But it was a good time and got to see Chelsea versus Arsenal. Wasn't a great game for Chelsea at all, but it was an experience.
So I saw your interview with Constantine Kissin and Francis Foster of Triggernometry. Wonderful. That was a superb interview. I listened to it while I was going to work. It was engaging throughout. It was wonderful. Wow. That was
Thank you.
There was so much in it to unpack. So you reached out to them or they reached out to you. How did you make the connection to have that interview? How did you make it work?
So sometime last year I had actually reached out to them. I think it was a little while after I published the book. I want to say it might have been late last year. And actually they told me, I sent my book to Constantine, and Constantine said, your book is good. It's just that we feel like we've explored the topic of race a lot. 2020 happened. In 2021, it was kind of like a lot of discussions about race and things like that. So I was like, all right, but I wasn't trying to push it, kind of come to the point where I'm just like, it'll happen. It's just a matter of time kind of thing. And then it was a few months ago, I was like, you know what? Let me just send him a message. So I was like, hey, I understand, you've discussed race, but there's more to it. I want to talk about the importance of family and stuff like that and fatherhood. And Constantine just became a father not too long ago. And I think it was, people say timing matters. I think for me, it was good that I was rejected. I don't want to say rejected, but it was good that it didn't happen, because it allowed for me to do more podcasts, more interviews, get comfortable discussing the topic, become less and less nervous. So what you saw in that interview was just kind of like a culmination of all the experiences kind of coming together to sit down with them. And I think part of the reason why the interview went really well is because they're great interviewers. I was comfortable. We had some banter beforehand. I was a little bit nervous in the very beginning, although you can't tell, only because it's like they're doing the intro and I'm like, oh shit, I'm here, kind of thing.
This is happening. This is live. This is going down.
Right.
It felt surreal, right?
Yeah. It was a little bit weird. But after maybe like 5 minutes or so, I was just talking. And it got to a point I was like really comfortable. And if you told me like, hey, would you talk about this? I'd probably be like, no, I probably wouldn't even bring that up. So like, the one thing was the feminism part. That was a moment where I didn't even have to go into that area, but I was I was so comfortable, and I was just like, I think feminism hates women. He was like, what do you mean by that? I was like, oh shit, I'll tell you what I mean. So it's just kind of, it was just a comfortable moment, but I was able to explain what I meant. Yeah, and it seems to be well received. The people who reached out to me really took something from it, and kind of like what you said, there was a lot to unpack in that conversation. And I'm glad that people understand that there's more to what I have to say than race. Like even my book, Black Victim to Black Victor, talks about race, but it's deeper than that. It talks a lot about family, impact of children, things like that. So I want people to understand like there's substance to it. Like the race part to me is like the least interesting thing. The human element, the importance of family and children and the family dynamics are far more important to me. So I'm glad I had the opportunity to kind of say all those different things. And you heard like the last, you know, like what's the thing that people aren't talking about? And he's like, oh hell, man.
He said I tried to end on a positive note, and I was giving you all these uplifting words, trying to end on a positive note. Well, it was funny. It was funny.
But yeah, ultimately, I was a little bit nervous. It was a little bit weird because afterwards I was like, shit, what did I talk about exactly? Like, because normally I just talk and I don't think about it. But I was really thinking about, because I don't do in-person interviews often. So it was a little bit different. And so I was like, did I say this? What did I talk about? I was like, oh shit, I did say that. I was like, well, I hope people like it. So
No,
it turned out good.
People loved it. The part that got me the most was when you talked about how child molesters, how they pick out a family where there is no father, where the mother is single and she's just raising the child. It never occurred to me that that can even happen, that they could actually profile families like that, just go in there because they're vulnerable and they abuse the kids. I was like, wow, this is something real deep, and it's something I hadn't thought about. And it just shows how much women who are single mothers and their kids, how vulnerable they are.
Yes.
The statistics is all there to show that it's not an ideal situation. It's not an ideal situation to raise children in. And even you brought in the example of your mother, where she just decides, you know what, I don't want to have a man in my life. I just want kids. And there are women like that today who just want kids, and it's what they want, but they are not asking themselves, what do the kids want? What's best for the kids? This might be what's best for you, but this isn't, a family isn't just about one person. It's about everybody. So you have to take into consideration the needs of the children. And because the children are the children, their needs should take priority, right? At least as an adult, you can handle certain things yourself, but the impacts of certain decisions on children, it might be life altering. So that part really got me.
Yeah, I think a lot of the relationship question these days is purely about what the adults want. And I think if people thought about, like, if you know that you want children, let's just say, for example, and you moved about life like you wanted children, then who you select as a partner would look a lot different. And I think, a lot of people are just kind of like, well, this person makes me feel good and I kind of like them, and let's see where this relationship goes. And then they have a child with them and then wondering why the father isn't there, or why the mother is crazy and she's keeping the kids. It's like, well, were the kids on your mind in the first place, or was it just about you, how you felt in the moment? Also, we don't have the same social pressure to stay married, be marriage minded. We have a hookup culture going on, and the apps make it really easy for certain people, not all men, but certain men, to just hook up and kind of keep it moving. So it, have all these different things that didn't exist in the past to kind of help regulate society. So, for example, if you had a child out of wedlock, probably like in my mother's generation, you were kind of looked at as a side eye. And now today, you're kind of like, one, you point blame at just the man, and two, you say, you're strong and independent, you can do this, we'll help you, we'll support you, and you have all these services. And it's like, there is no regulating of what is acceptable and what isn't, especially when it comes to family planning. It's whatever you want, right? It's how a family looks different ways to everybody. You hear all this language. And actually, I know I didn't talk about it. I'm kind of glad I didn't talk about it during trigonometry, but I feel very weird about surrogacy. There is something very strange about it, and I'm not sure if I'm fully comfortable with surrogacy, especially with same-sex couples. It has nothing to do with them being gay. I don't if that's how you want to live your life, but I'm thinking from the child's aspect, especially when it's children who are from some random egg, some random sperm, and put into some woman. Yeah, there's something unsettling about it. And actually, what's interesting, I was watching this speech by Katie Faust, and she brought up that topic, and I was like, there is something that's uncomfortable about it, right? I don't know if we're there as a society to kind of question it, right? We're kind of like, well, if they want a baby, they get a baby. If you can afford to do this, why not? All the child needs is love. It's like, no, there's so much more than just that. Like, obviously we want children to be loved and taken care of, right? We don't want them to be abused, but it is less likely for me to abuse my son because he's my blood versus some other man. And when you have a surrogacy situation, there is no emotional connection, especially if you're not the one who's giving birth, right?
Yeah.
So the mother isn't in the life as the mother. She's just giving birth, and it's not even her egg in some cases. So she's just like an apparatus for childbirth, and then someone else steps in. So there's all these separations, all these disconnects when it comes to this natural connection to the child, and it's completely disconnected. It doesn't exist. And I don't know if we want to create that, like, because it doesn't have to happen. Like, it's not like it's adoption, right? Unfortunate circumstance, the child ends up in adoption. Instead of them having been in foster care, someone adopts them, raises them, right? Life happens. But surrogacy is purposeful. They're purposely creating this environment that isn't natural, right? And I think people used to be okay with surrogacy from a standpoint of a woman wants a child, but she's unable to have a child. So she found someone who can give birth for her while using her eggs or something of that nature. And so I think we were growing okay with the idea of surrogacy. But now it just sounds like we're just having like test tube babies and embryos everywhere. And I don't know. I'm just uncomfortable with it.
Hey, I wrote this very kick-ass crime fiction novel, which also features a thought-provoking debate on race and colonialism. If you'd like to support this channel, please grab a copy. The link is in the description below. Thank you. I think it's a problem of the liberalization of everything, and in a sense, it's a symptom of toxic positivity, where everybody, it's a feel-good atmosphere. I mean, but that's not the real world. That's not how life really is. Everybody's not supposed to just get what they want at every time, at any moment they want it, right? Because there are going to be conflicting interests. It might be good for you at this moment, but in the larger scheme of things, it might not be good for the human race, and it might not be good for society. So while it may be painful in the part of the individual who is shamed for having a child out of wedlock, but looking at it on a grander scale of things, it's actually better for society, right? So it seems as if we have sacrificed the societal goods and societal goal to optimize the happiness of the individual. But by the end of the day, if society is miserable, even the individual becomes miserable. Right. So it's not actually solving the problem. I look at the West and I say that the West has become captive to its own freedom. I mean, there's so much freedom that you are now captive to it itself, right? Even the idea of freedom itself is now putting people in chains, putting people in bounds. There are no limitations. The liberty is everything goes. I mean, men can say they are women nowadays and nobody can question it, right? Women's spaces are being taken over by men. Women's spaces, men are going into women's sports and dominating it. And it's okay, you can't say anything. If the women say, it's like the patriarchy has found a way to rebrand itself. And yes, that's what I think it is. I think it stemmed from the fact that femininity is sort of in trend right now. The feminine is hailed as the highest ideal of what it means to be human. There's toxic masculinity, so men are trash, men are this, men are that. And some men, maybe in a weird, twisted way, were like, okay, well, femininity is trending. I can be a woman. What if I become a woman? It's like an upside down world. I don't know how you guys manage to wrap your head around it in the West. It's crazy to me.
I mean, thankfully, stuff like what we're describing isn't something that everyone experiences. We live in a very, very large country. Obviously, like certain things are happening, they're just not happening everywhere. They might be happening in maybe certain industries. Like, for example, the woke stuff, there's like drips and drabs of it everywhere. And then there's certain places where the faucet is completely turned on, right? Or certain industries like Silicon Valley, the faucet's turned completely on. It's a weird dynamic because we're such a large country. There's a lot of different people from different regions that have different views on different things. And certain things kind of come into play and certain things don't. I think the one thing, especially when we're talking about like the woke stuff, the one thing I think people should understand that there are aspects of it in every state. So I think sometimes we get caught up in blue state, red state, right? But it's not like that anymore. And many things, it's more of what industry are we talking about? So in education, you have the teachers unions, you have national teachers unions, and they are progressive, which means that the instructions they bring down to teachers are progressive, which means that they influence curriculum, they influence all different types of things. And especially big city teachers unions, they have a lot of power, a lot of influence. There's a reason why kids didn't go to school for a long time in certain areas, and their neighboring towns were able to because they had a lot of power and they had a lot of influence, and teachers didn't want to go back to school. It's just that simple. And I think the woke stuff, the progressive stuff, is being brought in by teachers. We also have to understand liberal arts schools are the breeding ground for teachers. And what else is there? A lot of the progressive ideology, a lot of the neo-Marxist stuff, that's where they're learning it. So it's normal for them. And once they get the green light within the public schools, or sometimes even if they don't get the green light, we've seen libs of TikTok where the teachers are like, they don't want me to do this, but I'm going to do it anyways, because they turn into these activists. But they become teachers, right? And they become teachers in Missouri and Iowa, right? They become teachers everywhere. And they push whatever they want to push onto the kids. So it's not a blue state, red state issue when it comes to that. It's an industry issue. It's a source issue. And all of these different teachers are coming from same type of liberal arts schools all over the country who teach the same type of stuff. The teachers unions help to reinforce it. Administration, guess what? They come from the same schools, same environments. I mean, you have an entire industry that's kind of built this way. And once they get in power, they don't really care about what the parents have to say about it, whether they like it or not, or even notify them to tell them certain things are happening, certain things aren't. They say, well, this is the new standard according to us because we're the standard bearers, you know? So it's no longer about our children. It's no longer about the parents. It's about what they think is right for the rest of society. And it's about their activism towards it.
Wow, I mean, it seems as if the children are being brainwashed from a very young age, and they're only going to know what they know, and they're only going to know what they are taught. And it will cause a lot of schism between parents who are trying to mold their children in their values and what the children are being taught in school.
Right.
Because children are impressionable. Children really are impressionable.
Mm-hmm.
You have ideas as a kid, you fantasize, you think of crazy things. Supposing someone told you that your fantasies are real, supposing someone tells you that you can actually be a dragon, you can be whatever things you think as a child, and you begin to actually act them out in real life, you it's as if you're bringing the fantasy world to reality. And that's what I see happening essentially with the gender stuff in school right now. Kids can't tell their left from their right. How the hell are they supposed to know what gender they are if gender is a multiplicity of things, if it's not binary, if it's not along sex lines? How are they supposed to know? How are you supposed to separate fantasy from reality? They're kids. That's why they have adults. That's why you have guardians. That's why you have parents to take their hands and show them the way. Because human beings were, as much as we have some basic instincts, we're also very social creatures. We absorb a lot from our environment. We learn a lot from our environment. That's why someone who is born in China, even though he's black, he will learn to speak Chinese. He's not going to
Mm-hmm.
say because he's black, he's going to automatically speak a language that black people speak. No, from his environment, he's going to absorb those things from his environment. So children are impressionable. So a lot of these things that they say today, oh, this kid is trans. No, you're just socially engineering this kid to be something.
Right.
You're molding them, you're pressuring them into what they're not, right? So I don't know, man. I don't know. I think it's way too much. I think they should put a break, just hold it a bit and take a step back. What are we really doing here? Where is this going to take us to for the future of humanity? I heard that there is a birthing crisis in the US right now, that families are not having enough kids in the US, right? I think I heard that a few days ago. But how are people supposed to have kids when a lot of young people these days are encouraged to transition, where they lose their reproductive function, and where the economy is so bad, people cannot even afford to have families, or where there's a hookup culture, or where there's feminism and women feel that, well, my job, my career is much more important than the family. Now, these individual things, which is hailed, you can do this, you can do this, we're now seeing the cumulative effect of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're optimizing the happiness, sort of, in quotes, of the individual at the detriment of society.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree with everything you're saying. The one thing that kind of came to mind as you were talking, we have an antenatal movement that's currently going on. All the different things that you're saying. So from an aspect of even climate change, you don't want to have too many children because carbon footprint, the abortion situation, the trans situation, all these different things play a role in curbing people multiplying, basically, and how we in some ways we're disrespecting children and their possibility of developing appropriately. So it's no longer about them. It's about what the adult wants. It's I call it the Munchausen by progressive. It's like, yo, you are a boy. It's like, all right, now put on the pants. It's that kind of the adults pushing and pushing and pushing stuff onto kids. And listen, like, if you grow up in a Christian household, your parents are going to teach you Christian values, right? There's a relative amount of, you could say, indoctrination that we all tend to have within our own household. We're kind of dictating what's normal, what's not normal, because children are impressionable. But that's our right, is to raise our children the best way that we see fit, with the boundaries as far as being the law, like, so, abuse and stuff like that. But there are things that are just normal, like what most people do and think. And there's some gray area in there as far as what's normal and what's not. So, like, you'll meet somebody who's well adjusted and they grow up in a seemingly appropriate household, and you find out, like, oh, everybody's naked all the time. It's like, well, that's a little bit different. Like, your parents are just walking around naked all the time. So that's a little bit different. That's not a warrant for something crazy or that you think something is wrong. But this attack on what's natural, this extra push to mutilate children, to make them confused, because there is something confusing about it. Oh man, I wish I could remember what it was called. Social emotional learning, SEL. Part of SEL, and I'm going to be butchering this with somebody who's more understanding of SEL, but I'll just give you like an example. SEL changes how children learn certain things, and it makes it purposely confusing for them, right? So it's almost like what you see is not really what you're seeing. You're seeing something else, And you do this enough to make the kid accept that what their eyes are seeing is not really there, to accept this new way of seeing things, which is juxtaposed to what they would normally say and normally feel. So there, it's manipulation, and it's purposefully done to achieve some sort of outcome that they want. You have all these different tactics to get kids to accept what's not. I don't even want to say what's not normal. I like to say what's not natural, and have them confused and turn out some way that some adult wants them to turn out. And what makes it even more worrisome is that there is also this push to have the government reinforce it, to say, like in Canada, for example, if you don't refer to your daughter as your son and you call them the wrong pronouns, that this could be grounds for you to actually go to court for your own child, right? And God forbid you have some sort of custody situation with the mother and you're the father, or vice versa. The state's now involved because you don't want to affirm your child's new identity. And I think there's something very, very troubling about that if that keeps going in that direction, where people lose custody of their kids or lose their ability to see their kids because they're not affirming their delusion. They're not going along with the get along, so to speak. And I'm a little bit worried about it, but in some ways I'm optimistic about our future.
To me, this seems eerily like a religious concept, right? No, the West is usually famous for this separation of church and state, but it seems as if religion rebranded, stripped of all its practices, is infused right now into American social, political, social, cultural life. For example, what is affirming? What is affirming, right? Isn't that a thing of, isn't that an emotional thing? Isn't that a religious concept of accepting someone as they are, right? Isn't that, how does affirming come into a legal, how do you legislate something like affirming? It's so nebulous. It's not tangible. It's like faith. You understand? You can't see it, you can't touch it. How do you know that what this person is saying is actually true or correct? What exactly is affirming in the first place? What if I say I'm a tiger? What if I say I'm the president? Are you bound to respect that? Because there should be no limit at all. If you are supposed to affirm the identity of any human being, anything they say they are, they're supposed to affirm it, then there should be logically no limit. You can claim to be just about anything, and people should be obliged to recognize it as such. So where is the boundary? Where is the boundary? There's no boundary, but they just bring arbitrary boundaries after they have created a category that's supposed to be boundless, because identity is subjective. Identity can be anything. And a lot of the time, I see this gender identity as a personality thing.
Yeah.
So people are just, they're just sexualizing their personalities. For example, when they say a woman is only what a woman can be, of course, there is no one way to be a woman. There can be 1,000 ways to be a woman, right? So no two women are the same. No two women express their femininity in the same way. In fact, there are as many ways to express femininity as there are women in this world. There are as many ways to express masculinity as there are men in this world. So by that logic, you should go by saying that every individual has its unique sexual or gender identity. There shouldn't be anything like binary, non-binary, because those are categories itself which people can still share. But if it's an individual thing, then it has to be as unique as the person's name. So what's the 100 genders? It shouldn't be 100 genders. It should be 9 billion genders in the world. But that's not what it is. So you are creating a boundless category, yet you want to still confine it within bounds. it doesn't make any sense. It just drives me nuts.
It's purposefully confusing, and I think ultimately that's the point. That's the point of the neo-Marxist movement, is to be confusing, to sow discord, to cause people to question things that they normally wouldn't question, to cause distrust, even amongst people, not just institutions, to make them question what their eyes are actually seeing and accept what is not actually in front of them. It reminds me of the I can't remember the name of the experiment. I don't know if you've probably heard of this, the psychological experiment they did. I think it's like in the 70s or in the 80s. They had a guy go in the room, let's just say with like 5 other people, and the guy was just a regular guy, but everybody else was an actor who was in on it. And so they would ask questions like, what color is this? Red or blue? And everybody would say red, even though it's blue. And the guy's like, it's blue. And he's looking, he's like, what the hell's going on? And they just kept asking question after question. And so the test was to see how long he could go being the outlier, questioning things. And at some point, I think they said like most of the people just conformed
and accepted
and just accepted it. But one thing that they did say is that when it was more than one person, they went even longer or completed without conforming, right? So when they were alone, it made it very difficult to go against what their eyes are seeing. But when they were with someone else, they felt like, okay, there's somebody else like to confirm, like I'm not losing my mind. And I kind of think what we're doing here is one of those things. I know when I wanted to write my book, before I wanted to write my book, I felt like, am I the only one who's seeing this? Like, because it feels like everybody is crazy around me. Like, it feels like everybody's having a panic attack. And I'm just like, I mean, it sucks that George Floyd died, but I don't know this dude. And that's not the world that I live in. And that's not the world that the vast majority of these people live in. Like, why is that? Like, why is my black friend who is highly successful, has had a good life, all of a sudden a victim in society because one black guy died? Like, it just seemed illogical to me. And I felt alone in feeling that. Like, are there other people who are seeing this? And it wasn't until I went into like free speech arenas, free speech forums, where I was talking to people like, yeah, you're not alone, man. And I was like, okay, all right, so I'm not losing my mind here. It wasn't necessarily just like confirmation bias, but it was just kind of like talking to people. And finally, like, I found some people who were just kind of like not so emotional and just kind of being logical and just having a discussion about it that didn't exist anywhere. Well, I was on Facebook at the time, but definitely didn't exist on Facebook. It was just filled with a bunch of normies who were just reacting to what's on television. And I was finally talking to some people who were just kind of like looking at things and actually just discussing it. And that's kind of where I built my confidence to actually just start writing the book. But the book was just a way for me to express myself because I didn't feel like I could express myself. But I felt before writing the book, I just felt alone, right? And it's hard to express yourself when you feel alone in the situation. And I'm glad that my book has been something that so many people are saying, like, I thought I was alone in how I saw this. Thank you for saying this, because now I'm not crazy.
Yeah.
Like, thank you for saying this. So when I say I'm optimistic about certain things, I'm a guy, the IT guy by trade. And I decided to say something. And you're a guy as well. You decided to start a podcast so you can have these discussions. Like, we're doing something so people can understand that, yes, it is the color blue, right? You don't have to conform and say that it's red when you can clearly see that it is blue. And the more people stand up and actually speak, and the more people are allowed to speak, the more you realize like everybody else is saying it's blue too, right? It just seems like it's this loud minority of people who are just saying the color is red.
Red.
And so I think I guess my purpose is to represent the normal people, right? The silent majority who may not be able to vocalize certain things because of where they work, or maybe they just don't know how to express certain opinions. But to say like, yeah, these people, like, they're silent, but they're not invisible. And I think that's the difference.